Mic check 1 2. So tax season is coming, right? And everybody's going to get a bunch of money. And usually that's when a lot of folks decide that they now want to start collecting something, whether it's video games, baseball cards, sneakers, shoes, whatever the case may be. Folks love to get into collecting. And I figured now would be a good time to share with my subscribers 3 consoles that I think you should avoid trying to get into if you're just starting off a video game collection. And then I want to talk about 3 things that you should keep in mind when starting a collection to kind of help you build it the right way. And by the right way, I mean building a collection that you will enjoy, that you will be proud of, and that should you decide one day to give up the hobby, you won't have a difficult time exiting the hobby, meaning you'll have a relatively easy time selling the things in your collection. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with the 3 systems that I think you should avoid if you're starting a video game collection in 2024. The first one is obviously going to be the Neo Geo AES. The reason why I say that you should stay away from the Neo Geo AES is for one main reason. It is probably going to be the most expensive console that you find either out in the wild or you find online. A loose Neo Geo console with all of the original cables, cords, and controllers are going to run you somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 to $500, maybe even $600. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful console, and this legit is the closest thing to an arcade in your house. This is a console that gives you probably one of the most genuine arcade experiences. And if you grew up back in the day where arcades were actually like a thing, because like arcades aren't really a thing right now. Like my kids are probably never going to go to an arcade parlor where there's a bunch of arcade machines and everyone's just rocking out to different arcade games. Everything is online. The social aspect, the in-person social aspect of gaming is all but evaporated. People don't even go to each other's houses anymore. Like everybody's lazy. Like everybody's like, you know what, I'll meet you online. Gone are the days where it was, hey, I'm coming over this afternoon so we can play this game together. It's, oh, I'll be online at 4 o'clock, meet me there. So if you're an old school gamer and you're looking for that arcade experience, the Neo Geo will give you that, but it's going to come at a steep price because like I said, the console itself runs for anywhere between, like I said, $400 to $600, depending on the condition. Now, outside of that, these big old dinosaur looking carts, while yeah, they pack a lot of punch, these two can also run you a good penny. Most Neo Geo carts, if it's a good game, like a game that you actually want to play and will have a good time with, those carts are going to run you anywhere between $250 to $350, $400. If it's a really good game like Polestar or Blazing Star or Shock Troopers, or forget it, let's pretend you want Metal Slug, the original one, now you're talking thousands of dollars. So the barrier to entry in getting into this console is definitely going to be the price. And just to get started, you're looking at anywhere between $700 to $800 with just one game, maybe 1 or 2 controllers, and the original cords. So in my opinion, the Neo Geo is a console that I think most folks should just stay away from. There's a lot of ways that you can emulate Neo Geo games. And in fact, if you really, really, really want to play a Neo Geo game, here goes a sweet alternative. Just get the Neo Geo Mini, right? It has all of the HDMI hookups that you need. You can still get somewhat of that Neo Geo experience. This little guy has all of the more popular Neo Geo games. And to be honest, when you hook it up to like a TV screen, it's not that bad. And you can actually get the Neo Geo controller, like the little 4-button or 6-button controller, and you can jam out. And this is only like $30. This is only like $35. So in my opinion, if you really want to try out a Neo Geo, go get the Neo Geo Mini, because it is literally like a tenth, maybe less than a tenth of the price for the original hardware. So I say stay away from the Neo Geo. This next one is really going to make a lot of people mad. And it's okay. Don't be mad at me. Don't unsubscribe. I mean, you know what? Shoot, heck, unsubscribe. If this makes you that mad that you want to unsubscribe, c'est la vie. But I got to say it. I think if you're a new collector, you should stay away from the GameCube. Here's why. There has been so much hype. I don't know if there was another console that was more overhyped than the GameCube during the pandemic. From like right before the pandemic all the way through the pandemic, the GameCube was one of the most overhyped consoles on the planet. And I can genuinely say that because I actually got the GameCube back when it came out originally, back in like 2001, 2002, I think was when I got mine. And I remember when the GameCube came out, when I got it, one of my parents got it for me, and the first game that I got for it was this guy right here. This is one of the first games I ever got for it, Star Fox Adventures. Now, this game is trash. And to be honest with you, even when I had it back as a kid, it was really hard for me to even get past the first level. This is just like a difficult game. But there really weren't a ton of great games for me on the GameCube. As you can see, my GameCube collection is very small, and I'm about to sell this Path of Radiance because I don't even know if I'm going to play that game. But this is the primary reason that I had a GameCube. Really, like, this is where I spent the majority of my time when I had the GameCube, was playing Super Smash Bros. Melee. And again, the only reason why I played that game this much was because I used to go to a community center where me and a bunch of other kids would play this game for hours. I mean, hours. Because before we were playing Smash Bros, we used to play Power Stone on the Dreamcast. Actually, we used to play Power Stone 2 on the Dreamcast, and that was a blast. And this is a console you actually should get, but I'll get to that later. Getting back to the GameCube, I mean, in my opinion, I think that this is a very overhyped console. And, you know, I just don't think you're going to get as much enjoyment out of the GameCube as you think you will. Unless you're like a diehard Mario fan. Like, if you like the Mario games, you know, if you want to play Mario Sunsplash or whatever it's called, Mario Sunshine, you know, or if you want to play the Zelda games, that's fine. But I think Nintendo has done a really great job of building a very strong ecosystem, and they've done a really good job of keeping their older games relevant by re-releasing them on their more modern consoles. And even if they don't re-release them physically, there's always a way that you can play GameCube games on a more modern console. Nintendo's just really good at doing that. And I think if you start to chase like original GameCube hardware, you're gonna wind up paying more money than you need to get a similar experience that you could get either on the Wii for a fraction of the price or even on the Switch. The other thing is that while the GameCube is cool, and there's a lot of cool things that you could do with it, like get the Wavebird, or you can, you know, get the Game Boy player adapter to play your Game Boy Advance games. All of that stuff is cool, but it just feels very gimmicky to me. And again, like, the library to me just doesn't substantiate the hype that the GameCube has. I think you really have to have a very special place in your heart for this console. It has to really mean a lot to you for you to really want to go after it. And unless this is something that like you grew up with, or unless this is something that you're just like, you just gotta have, you're a diehard fan of it, I say there's a lot of other consoles that you can start your collection with other than the GameCube, and I really wouldn't waste time getting into it. And it's also a little expensive. Like, I'm not sure how much GameCubes, I'm not sure how much they go for now, but they, you know, you can get a cheaper console with way more variety of games, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. I say look for something else before you go to the GameCube. The next console I'm going to talk about, Sega Saturn, for sure. If you're just starting off, I would save the Sega Saturn for later on in your collection. The Sega Saturn is a console that you get for specific games. Games that you may have grown up with as a kid. And again, like this, much like the Neo Geo, the Sega Saturn is really meant to give you that arcade experience because it's home to a lot of those great arcade games. When I grew up in the arcades, we played fighting games like X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel versus Capcom. We played a lot of shoot 'em ups. And that's what you're gonna find on the Sega Saturn. The problem with the Sega Saturn, kind of like the Neo Geo, just not as extreme, is that the Sega Saturn is the console itself. I think you can get probably for between $100 and $150, but then the games is really what's going to do you in. To get good Sega Saturn games, they're going to run you on average $200 and up. That's just really how it goes on the Sega Saturn. Now, you can kind of get around the system with the Sega Saturn and get one of these guys. This is called an action replay. And an action replay will allow you to play like some of the import games. And that's really what brings, in my opinion, that's what brings a lot of value to the Sega Saturn. Games like Batsugun, Metal Black, Thunder Force 5, Don Pachi, Cotton 2, right? Sonic Wings, Wolf Fang, Hyper Duel. These are the types of games that I think will really draw someone to the Sega Saturn, but these are extremely niche games. Like, you really got to be into games like Radiant Silvergun to really want that. And I think if you're just starting off building a video game collection, most folks aren't really going to know about these games unless they grew up playing shoot 'em ups. I grew up playing shoot 'em ups, so that's why I know about those games. And in my opinion, I think that there are a lot of other consoles that could give you a great gaming experience without having to spend as much or without having to go online and order games from overseas and pick games up from Japan. I just think that there's a lot of better options out there for you. And there's a lot of other things that you can, do with a lot of other consoles that you can get as opposed to getting the Sega Saturn. Now, if I were to start a collection today, what are 3 things that I would keep in mind? Well, one, I'm thinking about my budget, right? I'm thinking about how much money I have available to spend on a console, and then I'm also thinking how much do the games cost for that console, and is it going to break my bank or not? Now, I think that there are 3 great options that you can choose from if you were going to start a video game collection that aren't going to be as expensive, but that are still going to provide you a ton of fun. And the first one, I'm going to pull it out. I think you already know where I'm going with this. But the first one is going to be the PlayStation 2. If I were just starting off with a video game collection, I think I would go ahead and pick myself up a PlayStation 2. Why? Because the PlayStation 2 has an amazingly massive library, right? The library for the PlayStation 2 is crazy. I think, what is it, over 3,000 games or something like that? And it's not just 3,000 games of shovelware. The PlayStation 2 is one of the few systems that has a ton of games, but it also has a ton of really good games. And the really good games won't, blow your pockets away. You can buy a bunch of really great games, fun games, classic games, quality games on the PlayStation 2 and not break the bank. Now, don't get me wrong. The PlayStation 2 does have its own set of super expensive games, but there are a lot of really good games that you'll be able to find on the PlayStation 2 that won't break the bank and that will give you a lot of fun. My big issue with the PlayStation 2, for whatever reason, the PlayStation 2 displays it's a very dim display. I don't know. It's just something about the way the graphics look on a PlayStation 2 that after a while my eyes just get fatigued of looking at it. Like when it comes, even like if you compare the PlayStation 2 to the GameCube, which I believe are in the same generation, what's that, the 6th generation? Somebody let me know down in the comments. But when I think about like the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube, I think the GameCube had way more vibrant colors. Like the colors pop on the GameCube, or even like the Dreamcast. Because I think even the Dreamcast is in that same generation, right? Like the Dreamcast, the GameCube, and the PlayStation 2, they're all a part of the same generation. And the Dreamcast and GameCube, picture-wise, like picture quality-wise, to me, were better than the PlayStation 2. You guys let me know what you think down in the comments below. But when I think about like games that I played on the Dreamcast, Marvel vs. Capcom, Power Stone 2, Sonic, even Sonic the Hedgehog, those games just played better on the Dreamcast and it looked better. That's my only gripe with the PlayStation 2. It's just the graphics and just the display feel very dim and my eyes get fatigued. But in terms of pricing, you could pick up a PlayStation 2, maybe $50, get a couple controllers, some cords, and you're off to the races. And that's because there's so many of this console out there that it's not super expensive. So that's one thing that I would think about. I would definitely think about the price, what you're going to be paying, and then also, the bang for buck that you're going to get with that. The second thing that I would think about, if I were to start a collection, is I would think about what I grew up with, right? which would lead me to something like the Sega Genesis, right? And I'm over here showing you a bunch of Super Nintendo games as I say the Sega Genesis. But I would think about a console like the Sega Genesis, because the Sega Genesis for me is a console that I actually grew up with, and luckily for me, Sega Genesis games aren't super expensive. Here, I'll show you some of the loose ones, right? So you've got some loose Sega Genesis games, and don't get me wrong, in my opinion, right? Again, this is just my opinion, but in my opinion, I think Sega, low-key, had more fun games than the Super Nintendo. Like, I'm probably going to lose some more subscribers for saying that, but the Sega Genesis, think about it. The Sega Genesis had more fun games than the Super Nintendo. Now, I understand that a lot of folks have a nostalgic tie to the Super Nintendo, because here in America, most folks got a Super Nintendo. Nintendo's branding and marketing was so strong in the 90s and they had such a foothold in the video game market, that a lot of people have like such fond memories of games that, to me, when I think back, just aren't like super fun. Like, if I had to choose between playing like Rice Star or playing like, I don't know, I'm just trying to, let me pick a random Sega Genesis game. So Super Nintendo game. So if I had to choose between like Rice Star, how do you say it? Rice Star? Somebody let me know down in the comments. But if I had to play this game, or play, say, I don't know, Cold Shadow, I'm probably going to want to play Ristar, because it looked better, the music was more fun, and it was just more of a fun game. Now, don't get me wrong, Super Nintendo did have its fair share of fun games, but they were what? More expensive, right? I think in terms of like action-packed Friday night, just jamming out, to me, the Sega Genesis just had better games. I don't think Gargoyles was even available on the Super Nintendo, right? Sega just had way more like exclusive titles, niche titles, and that's why, to me, the Genesis was just more fun. But I would say find a console that's true to you, that kind of makes you, that gives you that nostalgic feeling. You know, they say that the feeling of nostalgia is so strong that it can actually physically raise your body temperature. And I think that's why so many people are just so addicted to the nostalgic feeling. But for me, I would say find a console that gives you that feeling, maybe something you grew up with. Me, clearly, I'm a 90s kid, so for me, it's going to be the Sega Genesis. But if you were like a 2000s baby, then maybe for you it would be the GameCube or the PlayStation 2. Maybe you were born a little later, and maybe for you it's the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 3. But that's what I would think about. I would definitely think about those things. The last thing that I would think about if I was starting a video game collection, is do not discount the power of handhelds. Now, a lot of people might get a handheld system and think to themselves, well, I don't have a video game collection. But if you have yourself a couple handheld consoles, guess what? A handheld is still a console. The Game Boy is still a video game console. And you can start building a collection with a handheld like the Game Boy. And luckily, a console like the Game Boy, again, is very cheap, right? You can pick up a bunch of Game Boy games at a really low price that are a ton of fun and really kind of get a great experience. Yeah, it's a handheld. No, you don't have the option of connecting it to a TV, but you can still have a ton of fun. Maybe you're not a dinosaur like me and you don't remember the Game Boy. Maybe you're a little younger and you might want to get into something like the PS Vita. Maybe the PS Vita for you is what brings you nostalgia, because maybe when you were young, the PS Vita was really the main handheld at the time. The only tough part is that a Vita right now will probably run you between $150 and $200, especially if it's in good condition. This one that I have here is in pretty clean condition, and one like this might run you a couple $100. But then after you deal with that, then you have to deal with the price of the games. And Vita games are not easy to find, and usually they wind up costing you a little bit more. So you kind of have to deal with the issue of sourcing the games, and then once you do source the games, how much are you going to pay for them? So just to recap real quick, I would definitely, 1, keep price in mind. 2, think about what brings you the most nostalgia. And 3, don't discount handheld consoles, because handheld consoles are still consoles that can bring you a lot of fun and bring you a lot of joy. But again, avoid these three, especially if you're starting out. Don't even look at the Neo Geo. Waste of time. Too much money, especially if you're just starting out. Sega Saturn, I would wait. Once you've built a collection and you've become more familiar with the types of games you like, if you feel like the games that are on the Sega Saturn meet that criteria and are going to bring you, the type of fun that you're looking for, then I say go for it. Pick yourself up a Sega Saturn and then start getting into the games. Just be prepared to spend a couple dollars. And then of course the GameCube. While the GameCube is fun, and while yes, it does carry nostalgia for a lot of folks, I do think at this point the GameCube is so overhyped. It's been YouTube fodder for years now. Like, so many people have made videos on the GameCube, which is why I really don't talk about the GameCube a lot. Even though I grew up with a GameCube, I had one when it first came out. I played the hell out of my GameCube when I had it. It's just overhyped. And I mean, look, I low-key really love the GameCube. I even have a brand new GameCube with the KB Toy sticker on it. That's how much I like the GameCube. I just don't talk about it because so many other people do. But yeah, those would be the things that I would think about if you're starting off a new collection. And then I'll give you one last bit of advice, right? Don't discount the remakes, like the modern consoles that allow you to play old systems, like the Retron and things like that. If you're just really more focused on the games and the consoles don't matter to you, you can always buy one of those third-party consoles that allows you to play a bunch of different games or a bunch of different cartridges in one time. Or you could take it a step further and jump on something like this, which is the Analog Pocket, right? Now, the good thing about something like the Analog Pocket is that not only is it going to give you the best of both worlds. So this is one of those deals that's going to give you the best of both worlds, because on one end, the Analog Pocket is a handheld, but it's going to allow you to play all of your handheld cartridges, like your Game Boy Advanced, even your Game Boy. You can get adapters for this thing that'll allow you to play Neo Geo Pocket games. It'll allow you to play Game Gear games. So there's a lot of adaptability with the Analog Pocket. But even beyond that, I do believe that there's a docking station that you can get for this that will allow you to play games on the big screen. And this device actually does a really good job of scaling the video games, scaling them to where the pixels don't look distorted, and you can actually enjoy the game. The game runs pretty smoothly. And I do believe there's a way that you can kind of dock this so that you can connect it to a big screen. And if I'm not mistaken, you can download games and add them to the console. So you have a lot of flexibility with something like an Analog Pocket. I would definitely do my research before I go diving into like a third party, manufacturer of consoles or games or anything like that. This is actually a gift. My lovely lady got this for me for my birthday a couple years ago. So grateful. I've actually played this. I played a lot of Game Boy Advance games on this. I got to break it back out. But this is just a sidebar option for you as well. If you're thinking about getting into video games and you're more into the cartridges and less into the consoles, definitely think about something like the Analog Pocket. And like I said, tax season's coming up. I know a bunch of folks is getting ready to run into some money. And usually this is when you see folks starting to get into video games, because spring is right around the corner, yard sales are right around the corner, and it's just fun to go out and hunt for video games and get into the hobby. I know, because I was doing it. I've been doing it, and who knows, I may do it again this spring. But I just wanted to kind of drop this video for anyone who's thinking about it, thinking about getting into collecting. You do have options, but you don't have to dive into the deep end right away. Take some time, do your research, see what you like, and then go for it. But that does it for me. I am the Y2K Collector. Hopefully I told you something that's useful today. Take it easy.